welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on futuristic educations. We have Jamie from South Korea. We have Dr. Tamanna Khosle. Jamie, what you want to discuss for today's session? If you open your camera, maybe we have many important audience. They may know about you and what you want to share with our audience.
Yes, just give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Hey, Sharif.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Uh, yes, I'm just waiting for my friends from South Korea. I want to give chance Professor David Smith. Jamie, you can take your preparations. Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. So sorry about that. I wanted to put some Christmas in the background. I didn't have much time. Let me just put my background on again. Oh, I can't hear because it's a different one. So my name is Jamie. I'm actually from Canada, but I work and live in South Korea. It's 1 a.m. here. Sorry, my hair is a little messy. But I've been working in education for 22 years, actually. Um, so I've been in Korea. First, I started as a teacher, then I worked in publishing, coding and robotics education, all of those kinds of things. And I'm currently working with some fellow team members in Bangladesh to do a coding and robotics initiative.
Mhm. Thank you. Professor David Smith, what you want to discuss uh, about today's sessions? Especially we are discussing about futuristic education. Thank you, Dr. Stan, for joining today's session.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine. Yes. Professor David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you so much. The future of education, or as the topic says, futuristic education, is a passion of mine because of the importance and power I believe we have in education, how it is central to most of the topics we talk about on your programs. Uh, I believe in many instances we look at education today that very little of education delivery has changed much since the time of Socrates. Yes, we're using technology as part of it, and we're using things like that, but that the basic premise of how we educate has changed very, very little since that time as we look at it. If I try to look at the various scenarios that are happening, we see that there has been some recent inflection points that have made this much more important. The COVID pandemic uh, really taught us that we cannot take the future of education for granted, and that it's fairly easy to see the disruptions that were caused by that. And uh, as a result of that, one of the big trends in futuristic education that we saw is it has to become agile. It has to become more global centric. It has to be able to become a responsive system and a diverse system, and that we must plan in our future education for uh, other types of future shocks, such as uh, other pandemics. Some of the disruptions we see in the geopolitical environment today around the world, and how they're going. We see also that uh, we're seeing that the global growth of digitalization, the global growth of connectivity, we're seeing that schools, corporations, training, and other things, they're beginning to use more and more digital technologies to augment, but not necessarily replace traditional face-to-face teaching. And what we see is that students are beginning to understand that they can use the same digital capability as part of classes. One of the things I try to do with the time I had in teaching in education is I love to take those class projects where you work in teams, and I love to take those class projects and orchestrate them where the students can had to collaborate with students not just in their own local group, but they had to collaborate with students at a distance. If you go into the corporate world, if you go into much of the even the private world today, we are collaborating at a distance all the time. Uh, but yet in schools, we don't teach how to collaborate at a distance. We do not teach the future tools that are needed to do that type of thing. And we need to begin to look at them. We're going to see, we saw recently that
True.
the traditional university is no longer the way it would be perceived 20 years ago. And that we're seeing them begin to become more open things. We're seeing alternatives to universities and colleges come in place with boot camps, other ways of learning in there. In many areas, for example, in the technology area, many corporations are coming to the thought that a college degree is no longer necessary for their employees coming in. That we entered in, and I want to make this point very, very clear. We've entered a time of lifelong learning. And the fact that this lifelong learning is the new norm. In the past, we went to school, we worked, and then we retired. Uh, that's not the case anymore. We're in a time of hybrid growth where there's two models of that hybrid growth in education. One of them is you go to school, you work, you go to school, you learn, go to uh, work, and doing that approach. The others is that uh, learning is incorporated on a, a real time basis all the time, both just in time learning to help you accomplish your task, but even more importantly, skill enhancement. I can tell you in my companies, for example, with my developers, I encourage them to take other courses, other online courses to things to help enhance their skills, but even more importantly, stay up with what is going on today. And they're rewarded for doing that. So the other thing is you're going to see is that you're going to see the education extended, and you're going to see the international collaboration I talked about, how the technology advances. They're going to support much stronger uh, individualized learning. And you're going to see that uh, some of the structures of schooling, of universities, of colleges, of trade schools, and things will remain, but they're going to dramatically transfer the mechanisms for that. You're going to also see more and more education being outsourced. You're going to see how traditional uh, education has broken down as societies become more diverse, as they become more distributed. And you're going to see them take through things like privatization. You're going to see more homeschooling. You're going to see more flexible arrangements. And the digital technology that we've been talking about is going to be a key drivers. Uh, you're going to see just in time learning or learn as you go. Education is going to take place everywhere, anytime. And the distinctions between formal learning, like what we saw in the past at universities and colleges,
So, can I make a comment?
versus
No, go ahead.
informal learning, those distinctions between formal and unlearning uh, for learning are no longer valid as society turns around. The growth of generative AI is a great example where it is now being incorporated into traditional learning and actually in beginning to see in places like a pilot high school here in Austin, Texas, where uh, AI tools are actually replacing the teachers in some of their courses. And the other trend I think you're going to see to drive this, Sharif, is you're going to see schools as a learning hub where the they're going to have to open their school walls to connect schools to their community. And they're going to have to look at how to do social innovation, how to change the forms of learning, and how to do other engagement. Um, so those are some of my opening remarks, Sharif, because we actually see that because of all these drivers, we're going through a massive transformation of what we see in our learning environments.
Thank you. Thank you. Jamie, you have any comments? Okay. Now I want to give chance Dr. Stan
In
Foster.
South Korea,
Yeah. You want to add any
where
point?
the education system is very forward thinking. There's a lot of technology. But yeah, so what David Smith was saying, I think he's right. Education has changed, especially with COVID. See, in South Korea, they now have a one-to-one government policy. So in schools, every student will have a tablet, a computer. As of this coming year, 2024, it's going to be all digital textbooks. We're going to have AI, Korea and Asia in general. So I think that education really is changing. Like he said, sometimes it's going a little bit more online, but the biggest shift that I can see is that young people nowadays, they're not used to learning the way we learned when we were growing up, traditional paper and pencil. These kids are digital natives. They have learned how to use cell phones since they were kids. So they can't learn the same way we did, and we really have to catch up with the times, because I think that kids are kind of bored in school nowadays because the teaching hasn't caught up to the technology.
Thank you. Dr. Stan Foster, what you want to discuss? And thank you, Mr. Afnan, for joining today's session.
Oh, thank
Hello,
you.
everyone.
Well, it's interesting. Again, I've worked with a post-secondary institution, and I've seen a massive transformation, and it was spurred on by COVID. I agree with that, David. Now there's a lot of interactive forums now. A lot of schools use Zoom. A lot of schools use Teams. Some of their own proprietary systems, which I think now are getting even better and more interactive. I think that's a big element that has been missing in, our programs were both hybrid and 100% online. And it's a significant difference. We had international students and also domestic students. And for reasons, certain people want to do most of the times when they want to do the domestic face-to-face, it's because, and versus hybrid being coming like one time a week, or even doing the majority of your work still online, but having some face-to-face. Now, international students have to have that. They have to come in. Otherwise, why would they wouldn't even need to come to the United States. So if you're an F1 student coming to the United States, you're going to have some sort of classroom component to your education. But I think possibly the biggest thing that I've seen in post-secondary has been the use of AI. And there's been huge conversations within the community how to handle this. Some people are opposed to it. That they're citing plagiarism, and Chat GPT, for instance, was one of the main tools that a lot of the students use. It doesn't and didn't give any kind of citations. Which any kind of academic research, you have to have the citations. Where did you get your information from, right? So that was interesting, but the bigger interest for me was how are they treating this new tool, which is inevitable. Stephen Jobs was first to coin the term of digital native for our children and our youth, and it's absolutely true. These people the youngsters are just innately endowed because they've grown up in a digital environment that is so different from the environment, for instance, that I grew up in. I had, I'm a Stephen Jobs called a digital alien. I'm a digital alien, but I like technology. Actually, I've founded a couple Web 3.0 businesses now that I'm transitioning out of education. And I'm excited about where the technology is taking us. So I think in general, for futuristic education, there's a finding a comfort zone and a good mix of utilizing the technology, making it work well in the educational context, and getting better engagement. Because some of the earlier online, 100% online programs by universities and colleges were, frankly, I wouldn't want to take them. There was not enough interaction for me, and I learned by interacting, and I learned by the give and take of my colleagues and
Mm.
with my professor one on one in real time. Do I read? Yes, I read the textbooks, but that was kind of a byproduct. When I was going to university undergraduate, I had perfect attendance. Why? Because I found that if I listened to every one of the lectures, they covered everything that was in the textbook, and I didn't have to read the textbook as much. But that was a self-serving interest on my part. But I think now, though, with the kind of materials that are out there, and literally the ability to tap into anything in the world and bring it into your research and into your classroom, and then having multiple people in the classroom doing that, and so you can exchange ideas once you get to that point. I think that's the magnificent opportunity that a future of education brings to us.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what you want to discuss about this futuristic education, especially I know you have expertise in STEM, and what about the human progression through education in India?
Um, I guess, I mean, obviously, as both the panelists were saying previous to me, three of them, that digitalization has taken place, and so has it happened in India as well. So digitalization has taken place. The government is taking care of the fact that students have to be more involved, even at the level of no kindergartens, nursery classes. And so, one of the primary concerns for India and world in the present context is what knowledge, skills, and attitudes and values one needs to thrive in this world. So, what I'm trying to say is we need a value based system. So, digitalization and value system might just clash because students don't have the span to give attention to certain education. So I guess that span and value systems have to be increased among students. It has to be a value based education. So ethics and morality are must to be taught to students. Ethics is a concern of the contemporary world because that's what when people see violence in movies, etc. I just don't remember the name of the actor who said this thing. I would be very happy if I see young people uh, just not looking at movies but having more interest in philosophy, walking down the streets and speaking about philosophy. So I guess we are also proposing from our side to the government, and as far as, and also the world governments, that philosophy should be taught at the lowest level of students, when children are still very young. So I guess ethicality of the way sophists used to teach or Socrates used to teach, that kind of methodology should be inculcated. But the problem is digitalization and this kind of education might just clash. So we have to look into the fact that these this kind of an education should be harbored in developing and developed worlds, in particularity. And till the time a value based system, where ethics is not given importance, where young people do not have instant gratification of their satisfaction of knowledge. People might be very good in digital world, but their education system is weak. The value system, morality, ethics are weak. I guess that would not produce a good human being. So I guess education, purpose of education is to have a society which is sensitive to the needs of people around you, to the needs of other religions, which is not my religion. I'm concerned about that religion. I'm concerned about women, men, transgenders, LGBTQ. So those kind of things have to be there. The sensitization, that bond of sensitization has to be there, and that has to be inculcated. The digitalization might not be taking care of that aspect. So I guess that is what I want to point.
Thank you, Mr. Donald.
Well, everybody so far has brought up a lot of interesting subjects. I had to look up what David was saying about the using AI and as it's a private school in Austin. And what's really interesting is that they use AI to teach core subjects, which I suspect would be mathematics and a few other things. But they spend far, far more time teaching them things like public speaking and things that you can't get from AI. So it's actually a 3-to-1 ratio. The three being the things like public speaking and I was thinking about this, like obvious, in preparation for today, and it's interesting to note that Steve Jobs, who has been being brought up here, I consider his ex roommate Dan Kotke is a good friend of mine, and so Steve Jobs went to a very, very like airy-fairy liberal arts college. It's actually a very demanding college. It's a very good school, but it's very liberal artsy. And his major was calligraphy. Okay, so so I think that's evidence that what you study in college isn't necessarily training for your career path. Probably a bigger influence on what made Steve Jobs such a good manager or such an effective manager was his study of spiritual things, and especially Zen. So he was very, very, very like, you need to be centered. You need to be focused on what you're doing. You need to be present. That was something he was really big into. And Dan and Steve went to India to try and, follow the same gurus as the Beatles had and things like that. So Steve spent many, many years of his life studying spiritual things. So it's not necessarily that you get trained and then do a career path. That's very desirable in our capitalist system. But I'm going to say just right now that being in a manager track doesn't necessarily. Usually, you do your management work at an MBA level, a master's level. So it really doesn't totally matter what you do as an undergraduate, and something like psychology might be more useful for you as a manager, some economics, sociology, psychology, things like that, or who knows, calligraphy, and then get your MBA next, because because all of those things are focusing on people and human beings and how human beings do things and human stuff. And management, you can make a lot of money being a manager, and they're absolutely required for our system. I want to just point out that a lot of what we operate on is in a social world. And in a social world, we have roles that we don't get to create ourselves. Like if, say, for an instance, we're a software engineer and our expertise is JavaScript, we become a JavaScript programmer. And when we write up our resume and we apply, there's AI things that are looking at it, and they're trying to figure out from what we write on our resume what our role is, what slot we fit in. And then when people interact with us, they're interacting with us based on the particular role. We have multiple roles. We can be a parent and a amateur musician and a JavaScript programmer. But a lot of education is preparing us to take on these roles, these specific roles. And So that David talks about the idea of continuing education or lifelong education, and I think that's a very important thing. How it does have an issue, though, is that once people understand you as a certain role, it's very difficult for you to convince people that you're something different than they think of you as. So oftentimes, the only way that you can change who you are is change where you are socially and go to a different place. So say you're known as a JavaScript programmer and you want to start programming in jazz or something, you might have to switch companies. You might have to switch groups or where you are, because people will. And so that's one aspect of it. And then another aspect of it is it's not that trivial to learn a new, say, programming language. I mean, it's might take a couple of months to really be sort of entry level. I mean, you're not going to totally know every in and out of it in a couple of months. But when you're working 60-hour weeks, where do you get that couple of months of time to be able to switch what you're doing? I mean, the way that our system is set up in the United States, you don't have free time. I mean, it's just not something that's available to you. So the idea of doing lifelong education is very, I mean, it's important. It's wonderful. I think everybody should do it. I mean, and I certainly do it myself, but it's also, there's a cost to it. You kind of have to jump off a cliff and say, I'm going to quit doing what I'm doing now. And I'm going to take these months, and I'm going to take the risk that after taking these months, I'm going to be able to do something to be able to change what I'm doing. And that's the way that it's set up. And our system, the way our system's set up in the United States, I'm not going to get into that right now, but what I do want to say is a very interesting thing that I've been seeing a lot is teachers are quitting like crazy right now in the United States. And it came after COVID. Nobody knows quite what happened, but kids are vicious. They are absolutely not respectful of their teachers. They won't do what they're told. They won't listen. They're mean. They actually insult their teachers. They call them names. And so teachers are just quitting right now. And they said that people have been in this for forever. And they say they've never seen a cohort like this one. It's just, the Generation Alpha is just brutal. And so I don't really know, I don't understand that or know quite what's going on there. And I want to say that
Can I just add something?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I want to say that,
I'm from Canada, and so I have a lot of friends who are public school teachers.
You're fading in and out.
Sorry. Yes, you are too. I'm really sorry about that. But in Canada, we seem to have a similar problem. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
We seem to have a similar problem where this cohort of children is very different. I think part of it is that teaching has not caught up to where the kids are now. So I think they're having a hard time adjusting. I mean, it's very complex, but this is one of the reasons.
Yeah, that's that's a very reasonable guess for it. I really need to look at what's going on in Finland now, because really the core of what I'm getting to is that the way we seem to approach it is asking the question is like, how can what we teach the kids benefit the basically machine of capitalist society the most effectively? And so how can we train them for roles that within these roles they'll be the most beneficial to the basically to the people who own us? And the I and also the people probably lost a little bit of their socialization during the time of COVID. I wanted to support what Stan says a lot, because I've taught a lot, and I've only taught adults, and and so the adults that I teach are there because they really want to be there. So they're not forced to be there. They're there because they're really interested in the subject. They want to be there, and so, but if I have a class of 16 people, I really try and not do classes bigger than that, because I can't give individualized attention when the class gets too big. And I know in every student, by like what the expression on their faces when I say something, I know whether they're understanding me or not. I know by the kind of questions they ask, things like that. Everything that's going on is just, I am there, like listening to them and being completely aware of what's going on with them. And I don't. That's much more difficult to do in a digital environment. And it's all well and good to talk about digital training, and there are training or educational programs that can work, that are interactive and sort of act as games. They call it gamifying the education, things like that, so that the people have this interactivity. But it's incredibly expensive to do that, and they go out of date instantly. By the time they finish them, the society and goals and everything else have changed, and you have to do it all over again. So right now we're and for the foreseeable future, we're kind of at an impasse, like rapidly changing into a situation where people can have like interactive digital teaching. We just haven't figured out quite how to do that in a rapid enough way that it's practical. I can see as time goes on that we'll be able to do that more and more quickly, which is something for the future. But human beings we've got a lot of randomness in us, and like we do things that are very unexpected. And so if you're talking about doing something like management, or you're trying to do something where you're trying to look at user interfaces, or all these kinds of things that involve humans and human interaction, anything that you do that's going to be pre-done digitally is going to, you're not going to be able to anticipate everything that humans can do. So the human interaction portion of training, of teaching, I think is always going to be critical. And I think that one of the things that hopefully we could do more in the future is to have better metrics about what we're achieving. Because if we create a school where there's a certain percentage of it is done by artificial intelligence, how can we ask the question, is that more effective than some other method? How do we answer the question, is this method more effective than some other method? And then what happens is we have to look at what our goals are, and what Dr. Kosala I hope I pronounced her name right, Kosala mentioned about values and things like that. We need to ask the question: is that something? Do we consider a person to be educated when they can do calculus, but they can't carry on a conversation, and they don't know how to relate to people? I mean, look at how Elon Musk has been acting lately. I mean, he's gone crazy, and so what kind of education um, is he really something that is that kind of education desirable? So it's an interesting issue, and my hope for the future of education is that we learn more, find better ways of understanding how we're achieving things. And I want to kind of end with saying that in Finland, they have gamified a lot of stuff just in life. So they teach kids arithmetic by creating a store, and the kids pretend stuff that they sell, or simple things, and then they make change, and they learn how they do their addition and subtraction by actually doing things, and they're interacting with each other the whole time. And then they sort of learn the idea of the practicality of business and all these kind of things. So they model real life situations, and they actually live in these real life situations, and as a consequence they wind up learning skills like arithmetic and things like that. And so these are things we can hopefully do more in the future, and I think some of them can be digitalized. And I forgot one thing I was going to say. The last thing I want to say, address something Stan said, is that AI it's not accurate. I mean, it just makes stuff up. So Chat GTP is absolutely terrible for anything factual. Like, you cannot trust it one bit. It'll make up a citation. It'll look just like a citation from a real journal, and it's just made up. And so there was an article in Nature a few months ago, sometime this year,
so true,
where they did a comparison between. They said, well, okay, let's have ChatGPT write a journal article for us, and then we'll correct the references, and then compare it how long it takes to write a journal article just in normal ways by scratch. And it took much longer to do it using ChatGPT. So there's certainly things about AI that need to be fixed before we can really use it for education.
Thank you, Dr. Afnan. Thank you for joining. So, what you want to discuss about your projects and futuristic education?
it's true.
So, it has been a very interesting talk, by the way, guys.
Wait, before we go to Afnan, can I just say one?
Sure, Jamie. Jamie.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say that I think it was David. Yeah, I don't know why, because I'm on a landline. So don't know why, but anyway, I wanted to say that I think it was David who started with Socrates, and he was talking about education, and I was thinking that if you don't, yeah, he did. So I was also thinking, if you don't educate the heart while you educate the mind, then there's no education at all. I think we know this one too. It's from the ancients, and that kind of goes back to Dr. Kusla's point that we have to get back to values and think about what it is that we're teaching kids. But I loved how David brought it back to the ancients, because I think that's really important to consider this. That's it. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Afnan. Yeah.
Great. So extremely valid points, right? like Dr. Khosla, she was mentioning about all the communities and the values that has to be brought in with the ethics part as well, right? Um, Donald, you mentioned like a lot of information about tying up with the values, about how things should be moving forward, and there is a lot of questions. I don't see a lot of answers being mitigated here. And like I have been a recent graduate, so I am one of the millennials who had the opportunity to have different methods of being taught. I started off with a lot of books, and then somehow it converted to a lot of videos, right? So that's when I found where digitalization was coming through. Nowadays, information is being fed in bite sizes, right? And I personally have seen in a lot of younger generation, they do not have the patience to go through books, to go through actual references properly. And large language models, as great as they are, they do not allow cognitive abilities to be developed within kids. As like it's not possible anymore, right? You can, and no university, colleges, they cannot ban the adaptation of large language models, right? It's there and it's going to exist. I have a question to every one of you. Like, how would you see all these adaptations of AI and LLM models? Like, how do you use that into your daily life? How do you see your students? How do you see the future, like the next generation adapting to being able to retain information? So if you could add a bit of that, it will I really want to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Dr. Afnan, I think that we are almost in the closing remarks. So when you discuss, then in the closing remarks, they can respond.
Okay,
So,
sure.
yeah, our session is 1 hour.
Got it.
Yeah, we have to finish. Yeah.
Okay, yes, I hear you. So yeah, that's one of the questions I have, hands down. Like, how do we do this? Then follow up is, are we? Again, I think Jamie had a valid point earlier. Like, are the teachers caught up? Are the teachers, again, they're not respected in a lot of different fields. My mom, she's a teacher. She has been a professor in English literature for a while. She couldn't adapt to a lot of the digital technologies. She was like writing in a whiteboard, and while a camera was behind her, and she has never been used to it. So there is not enough skills to be taught about the digitalization of technologies for teachers as well. Now, gamification has helped a lot. Absolutely. Donald, you mentioned about adaptation of gamification in Finland, which is great. Finland, again, they are one of the best countries in the happiness index factors, hands down. And their ways of methods, it should be adapted to multiple different spaces. We have been I work with Entity Robotics, and we have been working on creating digital tools for training teachers and students at different scales. And we have been trying to use these technologies to foster different, not just technologies, but also different methods to create values within courses, and tying up physics, chemistry, math, STEM subjects with core values as well, trying to accommodate what different countries, different cultures bring together, and then defining courses accordingly. So trying to move away from traditional methods a bit, engaging with more experimental tools, and then as well creating real life applications, which should be standards nowadays. For example, we know for sure that industrial IoT, Internet of Things, they're here, and like people, like a lot of students, they know how to use them, but they don't know like the actual physics behind all the sensors or the connections, or there is a lot of gaps in knowledge transfer. That's what I personally believe. I think it's a very important topic to move forward with, and tying up with how the next generation, they're able, like if they are able to retain a lot of information or not. It has become more visual from my standpoint. Like they visually see what they want to see, and then that's what they retain as information, rather than reading a book and trying to understand the core fundamentals behind different topics that they study upon. So there are tools, but then again, there is a lot of questions of how that has to be properly done. And I think the key methodology for this would be transferring knowledge from different generation to generation, and that should be um, an active methodology, rather than something that we just discuss and do not act upon. Like I think there should be multiple projects that should be coming forward to allocate this facility, right? So that's pretty much me. That's just to summarize what I had to say, right?
Thank you, Dr. Afnan. Jamie, what you want to add as a closing remarks? And Dr. Afnan has question. Anybody can respond in the closing remarks. Thank you, Dr. Afnan.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Afnan, for what you mentioned. We are working some very interesting projects in Thailand and the Philippines. Like Afnan said, each country has its own unique learn the way they teach. A lot of it is traditional, but we're trying to bring these new technologies to these countries so that there can be more equity in education, IoT, IIoT. So we really are doing a lot of work to see how we can work together with people in these countries to make the education match what they need. So I'd be really interested to talk more with Mr. Donald, Mr. Stan, Mr. David, and Dr. Khosla later to hear their opinions on how we can make education more accessible and better for students in other countries for technology.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what's your closing remarks for today?
Yeah, I'll just like to say that human virtues.
And I just want to say thank you for the.
Dr. Tamanna.
Yeah, so I like to say that human virtues are something which have to be cherished and have to be nurtured, and a world which is dominated by AI might become extremely dangerous. Men and women have to come together to contribute towards development of empathy, a strong human to human connection, and ensure that there are like qualities like creativity, etc., are nurtured in a big way. So till the time that doesn't happen, AI, and I guess we all will become robots. We should not have a world which is made of robots without having human values into us. So I guess that's central, and AI should not dominate the whole, as Johnner was also saying something of that sort, that we should have that particular aspect in our minds, and that's what I would like to suggest. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today? And if you want to respond to Dr. Afnan question.
Sharif, thank you again, as said by others, for having me on this program and your other ones. My strong believing is that the world has reached a inflection point on education, and that we're going to see quite a few transformations coming up over the next uh, decade that will change education significantly. The concept of lifelong learning and the concept of collaborative learning are two that I think are going to be key elements of this transformation that is so necessary. We're also going to see boundary walls come down. Universities globally are beginning to understand that the campus as a teaching environment as an environment is decreasing, and more you're seeing even prestigious universities opening up their lectures online and letting other people participate in them. So you're seeing those changes hit very hard. A couple of other last things in my closing remarks. You're going to see the homeschooling approach in the uh, initial education, the elementary, the middle school, high school. You're going to see uh, homeschooling become more and more important today. For example, in the United States, there's over 2.5 million homeschool students every year, and the results of them in standardized testing is really good. You're going to see more and more personalized learning in there, and part of it is going to be uh, a learning environment that understands the students' needs, and that technologies are going to be put in place that help enrich the learning potential and creativity. For example, the National Education Association did a, a recent survey, and 94% of education professionals say that students improve their academic performance after technologies are incorporated to help in the learning process. And so you see that. There was comments on the various e-learning platforms. You're going to see more and more e-learning platforms coming up. During COVID, you saw Zoom and Teams beginning to use, and they are not optimized for education process. So you're going to see more and more e-learning platforms. You're also going to see more distant learning platforms that enable a mix of study, work, and family duties come in place because physical presence not required in so much learning. So learning becomes much more affordable globally across both developed and developing nations. Uh, and you're going to see that again. I said you're going to see physical campuses very changed, and they're going to become more of a hub and more directed towards science and research than actually classroom teaching. I believe in the future, you're going to see project-based learning become more, and project-based learning that expands to the new forms of education, such as boot camps and other types of education like that. And this project based learning, as I said earlier, will combine creativity, innovation, and collaboration to really look at how do you serve difficult uh, questions and how do you put this real world connectivity into it. And you're going to see social and emotional learning skills as a priority. Sharif, you know that one of my companies is a 3D conversational AI avatar based product to teach social emotional learning. That has what has fallen, and it's what Donald said earlier, that part of the participating in classes is that social emotional learning skill. And that's really important. And the school in Austin understands that social and emotional learning is really the one of the keys that we have to teach today in our students. So Sharif, I think that's really my concluding remark. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Dr. Afnan, what's your closing remarks for today's session?
For me, like it's been a very interesting talk, and there is a lot that I'm taking away from this conversation. Um, Again, to summarize what I've said before, it's just I and to tie up with a lot of with a lot of the other speakers. I think projects are I think they are coming together. So you develop a project, and you show kids how this is being done, and also like projects can accommodate multiple factors, right? They could be like I could speak from a STEM side of things. Like if you have a STEM project in mind, you're looking into the science bit. Then also you if if kids are being taught about the financial side of things along with the science, like I think there has been a massive issue with kids not learning about how to be financially stable, and that has been pretty much all over the world. Like once like kid turns to an adult, like that's something that's not properly taught in schools, but more in grad schools, right? That's my personal thing. Um, so with projects, there are packages that could be brought along to show what budgeting can look like. Then again, projects could allow kids and teenagers to connect with each other. They could be from multiple different cultures, and that ties up with um, Dr. Kosla's comment on how we need to be empathetic, right? In my personal scale, I have been in multiple projects in universities, not in actual schools or high schools, where I had the chance to work with people from various different cultures, and like understanding cultures and being culturally appropriate, right? Um, so like those could be tied in together. Like I think I completely agree with David's comment, and this is something that I personally had been advocating for a while, how projects should be tied in together. So that is my closing remark, right?
Thank you.
So
Mr.
projects should be brought in as a future.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Donald, what's your closing remarks in 2 minutes?
I just want to point out that I'm a big fan of TikTok, and I even have started making some of my own and kind of learning the system of it.
Please leave your handle here.
I got 3,000 followers, but what I want to point out is that you have absolutely no idea if what somebody is telling you is true or not. And the more sincere and congruent the person is, the more likely you are to believe them. And right now, we've got a situation in the United States where we have a presidential candidate, an ex-president, who his popularity is because he portrays himself as being tough and a strong man, and he's going to go out and he's going to fight the evil government and take care of all the people who've been downtrodden. And that it's absolutely ridiculous, but yet he manages to project this image of himself. And so with AI just making stuff up on the one hand, and the ability for people to basically actors to come out and act in convincing ways and convince people that they're telling the truth, we've got a real situation where there's basically multiple realities in the world. And so one of the things I think that we really need to think about in education and educators is how we can kind of address this issue of multiple realities. And I don't really have an answer to that. I think it's something that we really need to think about, because it's creating extreme divisions in society where one groups can't talk to each other because the very premises of their logic is different. They're both completely logical, but they're working with different premises, so that the conclusions that they arrive at are different, and it's difficult, almost impossible for people to communicate with each other under those circumstances. I think that's something that we all need to think of at every level, but I think that education is one of the area that it's most important.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. You know that World Talent Economy Forum today, we collaborate with the Marketing Institution of Singapore. So around 30 different cities, we are launching our innovation lab from World Talent Economy Forum and Impact Investment Summit. So from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, from North America, and from Australia, we have a lot of our team, those who are working for research and innovation, and those who are interested to contribute besides this dialogue for doing research and contribute for our innovation lab, and as a speaker for our summit, you can share your profile and you can communicate with me, and you can send me an email. And through this process, we can enhance the capacity of the youth generations. And I request all of our audience, our speakers, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Great. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.